All right, y'all. Today's video is about why your resistance, your non-compliance with government mandates related to COVID is important. That it's not about just the big press stories, the big arrests, the big protests. It's about everybody living their lives. And in order to make this case, I'm actually going to talk about a big news story. Let's get started. So, So before we get into the story and into the point, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. If you're into talking about the things that I'm into talking about, join the Discord. There's a link below, and that's where we keep the conversation going off camera. All right, y'all. So here's this news story. Killer cop might have used COVID rules to falsely arrest, rape, then murder Sarah Everard. That's from the Daily Beast, and it's over a month old. It mentioned the subtitle, the headline underneath. The second headline mentions that sentencing is going on. Well, this story is a month old, and sentencing has just come down. I just chose to use this story because it shows us it brings up a couple of things that we should talk about. So this police officer kidnapped, raped, and killed a woman in a obviously very psychopathic manner, and he has now been given life in prison. So I don't want to overplay the COVID atmosphere in this case. I am going to kind of attach them, but then I'm going to talk about what I actually think is relevant and helpful for the rest of us. This man was clearly an evil, wicked man. Okay, so at the end of this story, at the bottom of the story, we see that this man was a psychopath, and I'm bringing this out. A psychopath, by the way, does not excuse, just truly wicked, completely careless of the humanity of other humans. The reason I'm bringing this up, though, is to say that we really can legitimately divorce the COVID thing from this story. But then we'll get to my point. Here's the line. His perplexed wife told investigators that he was not a violent man and that he acted totally normal in the days after the heinous crime. So really straight out of a murder mystery on TV. And this man, it took 6 days to find the body, I think, and this guy acted totally normal. I don't know what his totally normal was, but goodness gracious. Frightening stuff. So the man was a police officer. People saw the kidnapping happen because it looked like an arrest. Right? So he had rented a car, but what people thought they were seeing was an undercover police officer arresting what one witness said, a woman who had done something wrong. Okay. Now, he had obviously planned to do this for a long time, etc. But it's important to focus on the fact that witnesses talked about how compliant she was. She had been at a party, almost certainly breaking COVID rules. A police officer comes up to her, shows his badge, ended up cuffing her, and she was utterly compliant. And everyone else assumed that she had done something wrong. Now, I'm not going to get on a high horse. I have to admit that if I saw in broad, in the street, someone flash a badge and pull out some handcuffs on a woman, I would not resist that. I would not fight to defend the woman. I would assume everything was in order. So I feel great pity for these witnesses who saw that. They're going to remember this for the rest of their lives. The real evil, wickedness, betrayal is just from this cop. But the paragraph here, knowing she, so there's a little bit of conjecture. I mean, this story itself has the word might in the headline. I'm going to read one paragraph with a bit of conjecture and then the important paragraph. Knowing she may have skirted lockdown rules, she likely agreed to get into Cousin's car after he showed her his badge or identified himself as a cop, Little said. Surveillance cameras on 2 passing buses and a witness account say Cousins handcuffed her and put her in the back of his car. A female witness who saw Cousins detain Everard told Little that she was compliant with her head down and did not appear to be arguing. Little then told the sentencing court that the woman believed she was witnessing an undercover police officer arresting a woman whom she assumed must have done something wrong. But in reality, Little said they were witnessing this kidnapping. She was detained by fraud. She suffered a horrible fate. Let's move on now from this case and talk about atmosphere. Okay, this is the point of the video. Like, as Americans, we've known for a long time that Britain there's an atmosphere of compliance there. One that we have found disturbing in the past, except now, with all this COVID stuff, we are discovering that we have a little bit of the Brit in us. We have a little bit of the Canadian in us. We have been massively compliant on an enormous scale. Now, what we need to think about is the atmosphere that we create when we allow the state to encroach on our lives and to make rules which it has no place making. This example, this story, it's tough to get around because we're talking about a police officer. And in most civilized countries, we would assume we would go along with a police officer if they detained us. Americans are occasionally non-compliant about that, but let's admit that that's the case. So the fact that it's a police officer makes it difficult. But this predator was swimming in waters in which he felt comfortable. He knew he would have success because an atmosphere has been created in which people allow the government to tell them what to do. The only way the government is not going to tell you what to do is if you keep your head down or you preemptively comply. And this is what we've been doing with COVID. We have been avoiding trouble with the mandates. And if you've been living your life in such a way as to avoid trouble, then you have been contributing to an atmosphere of compliance and to an not obedience to legitimate authority, but to compliance. And you've been contributing to an environment where abuse can happen more, right? So your day-to-day life is not a neutral thing. Refusing to wear a mask in public places, even when it doesn't create a scandal, even when it doesn't provoke an arrest, is rhetorically important. Because otherwise, we create an atmosphere where abusers, where predators can run free. Now, usually we're not going to have this sort of murderous psychopath, but what we are going to have are abusive bureaucrats. And every moment that we allow this sort of atmosphere to continue is another moment of restriction of freedom. So eventually we could get to the point where the state could treat us the way this police officer treated this woman. So we're not about the big showy arrest or the big showy protest. If that happens, that happens. What we are about is the day-to-day living under God as you ought, and not allowing abusive authorities to abuse their authority. The peace of Christ be upon you.
Aí sim é um homem de verdade, não é esses troços do grupo não, essas carcaças velhas, uó, fim de carreira.
Cadê você, profeta, autarquia? Hein? Pedrada no inferno, fala comigo aí, matador de demônio. Hein?